I'm really getting sick of these delusional people out there. And some of the people on other progressive podcasts and blogs, people, like Krystal Ball on Rising, and I know he's your friend Kyle Kulinski on Secular Talk, who are just so anti-Joe Biden, and they seem to be out for blood for him. And I really can't understand why. If this crisis right now that we are going through, it does not signal to people that Trump must be removed at all costs.
Right.
You are not only irresponsible, you are borderline selfish, and not caring about the lives that are being lost.
Delusional and irresponsible. That was a caller on the David Packman show questioning why Kyle and myself have continued to voice some concerns about Joe Biden. David did continue that conversation, explaining why the caller might have a different framework compared to the way that Kyle and myself are thinking about Joe Biden.
So Kyle Kulinski himself is joining us now via Skype to respond as well here with Krystal. Kyle, it's great to see you, sir. How are you?
Hey, good to see you guys too. How are you guys doing?
Good.
We're surviving.
So have you changed your mind about Joe Biden, Kyle?
Yeah, in the, what has it been, like 72 hours since that's been released? I've had a total change of heart. No. So, first of all, I just want to say, because I want to make it crystal clear, that David Packman actually did his best, even though he doesn't agree with myself and Krystal. He did his best, kind of like, talk that guy down off the ledge and kind of explain, like, well, I think you're being a little bit unfair to them. So he's totally off the hook. And in terms of this guy who voiced these concerns, I don't want to focus on him at all, because he's just a random dude and he doesn't have the ability to respond to us, and I'm sure he would like to engage on it. So I'm just using him as sort of a stand-in for the most common arguments as to, why people think that I'm wrong in not voting. I guess my response to him is that, to put it simply, I don't agree with you, dude. So there's this thing that happens where it's like people on the Democratic side, they just sort of like assume that you're supposed to agree with them and support Biden, but it's like, I have different standards than you do. So for this guy, he goes on to admit, like, I was going to vote blue no matter who. Okay, good for you. I'm registered as a Democrat here in New York because I have to, because we have closed primaries. But really, in my heart of hearts, I'm an independent. And, I'll vote with Democrats who are sufficiently left enough, in my opinion. Now, this guy might say, hey, it really comes down to the courts. It really comes down to doing harm reduction. And, my response to that is basically, not enough. You have weaker standards than I do. And, I think my standards are already pretty lenient. So just to lay it out for everybody, and it's funny that I'm the de facto spokesperson for not voting or voting third party, because I'm reluctant to do that. I don't want to be the spokesperson on this front. But for me, it comes down to, I need to know that Joe Biden will fight for at least one or two of my top 5 issues. And simply put, he's not there, and he's not going to be there. That's pretty clear. And those issues are Medicare for all, free college, living wage, ending the wars, and UBI. So I know he's not going to fight for them. The only one that he's even nominally in favor of is a living wage. But even on that front, I don't believe him. He was in power for 8 years, and he did absolutely nothing on that front. And he just recently came along to this, and Bernie Sanders had to pitch him a softball and say, Joe, is this something you will be in favor of? And Joe doesn't.
He's going to read the teleprompter. Yes, Bernie,
yes,
I am
in favor.
Exactly. So now I would have been convinced that he's for it if he, had it as like a recurring point that he made, but he doesn't do that, and he never did that. So I simply don't believe him. But, because I'm the lenient, nice guy that I am, I even loosened my standards a little bit more. And I said, listen, I still don't think he'll do anything that I really want, but if he picks Bernie or Nina for VP, I could suck it up and vote for him. Well, guess what? He didn't do that. He's overwhelmingly likely not going to do that. There's a 99.9% chance he doesn't do that. So I don't know what you want me to tell you. And then I even loosened my standards further and said, okay, if Bernie had used his leverage to get some tangible things like, Joe doing certain executive orders within the first 100 days, well, then I could get on board. But of course, Bernie didn't use his leverage. He squandered his leverage. And here we are. So basically, to sum it up, I know I'm rambling on here, but to sum it up, it's like, I don't agree with these people. So the fact that they're hectoring me, well, why can't the right-wingers hector me too and say, well, since you're not voting for Trump, that's a de facto vote for Biden? Because that makes just as much sense as when, the Democrats say not voting for Biden is a vote for Trump.
Kyle, to that point of what you're talking about, there are these current task forces that we can see here. AOC is represented on it, Pramila Jayapal. According to your loosest standard, you say, maybe in these first 100 days, I might consider voting for Biden. If these task forces produce something like that, is that something you might consider, or are the task forces just not enough in your view?
No, because I want something tangible. I think a task force is honestly insulting because it's a way to loosely pander to the left without delivering on anything specific. I think the fact, they put AOC on one of these task forces as if that's instantly will make everybody on the left be like, oh, well, now I guess I have to vote for him. Whatever, Green New Deal or whatever things she really believes in and will fight for, they'll listen to her and they might even pretend to go along with some of them, but they're not going to do it, which is why I say that, for me, it needed to be tangible. When I was talking about Bernie using his leverage, I really think that Bernie, since he has 30 to 35% of the Democratic base is his, if he were to bring Biden a list of 10 executive orders, including, he could say legalize marijuana, take it off the scheduled substances list. That could be one thing. He could say do a Buy American executive order, punish all the corporations that outsource jobs. You could all do this through executive order. There's a million things you could do through executive order. If Bernie brought Biden a list of 10 things and said, hey, man, listen, if you do these and promise to do them within the first 100 days, I'll do everything I can to get you elected. If you don't do them, good luck in November. I'm walking away and I'm going to sit out. I'm not going to help you. I think that Biden would have been put in a corner because he knows he needs at least some of those Bernie people. And so, maybe he doesn't say yes to all 10 executive orders. Maybe he says to Bernie, hey, man, I can't do these 5. I'll do these 5. Maybe he says, hey, I'll do these 3. Whatever it is, at least then we'd have something tangible. Task forces is a way to pretend like you care about the left and their issues and then totally dismiss it and ignore it. It's the same thing with the platform, how Bernie's so intent on well, now I got to get as many delegates as I can to influence the platform. So they can ignore it because that's what they're going to do. Because this is what I mean. And I'm not trying to say there's nothing that could have been done to get my vote, because there is. But it has to be a hell of a lot more tangible. I would have known Biden is for some of my most important issues if he actually talked about it often and in a recurring fashion. And, if he had promised on those executive orders within the first 100 days, not only do we have specific things, we also have a time limit on it. So, but he's not going to do that. This is all just, what's the word I'm looking for? Placating the left? That might be the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
No, that's right.
I actually have even maybe a more dim view, which is I kind of think the best case scenario is that it's meaningless and he's just placating the left. I think the worst case scenario is that you're actively co-opting some of your most, potentially powerful critics in a very similar way to what the Democrats did with Bernie effectively by bringing him into Senate leadership and making him more part of the club and part of the team. That sort of neutralized him in a sense. And the same thing with, if you have AOC on this climate change panel and then she's signing off on it, you've kind of defanged and neutralized and co-opted the person who could have been a critic in a powerful way.
If you're an outsider, be an outsider. Embrace that role. Don't play this cutesy little game where you start playing footsie with Nancy Pelosi and you start playing footsie with Democratic leadership and you want into the club, because you're not going to be able to deliver on the things that you were supposedly there to deliver on. And it's upsetting because 90% of Washington, in my opinion, are corrupt and or stupid. And then the 10% that aren't are just so immensely weak and sad that they get nothing done. It's like what we're seeing now with all these coronavirus bailout bills. Every single time we're told, hey, the left is going to fight on the next bill, on the next bill, on the next bill. And then we get nothing every single time. We still don't have UBI. They're considering doing a one-time $1,200 payment again to people. That's not a drop in the bucket for what people need right now. So it's just embarrassing. You have to be willing to be hated and smeared by the media and be hated by leadership. And guess what, guys? That's totally fine. Embrace their hatred because Congress has something like a 22% approval rating. You shouldn't want to be in that club. You shouldn't want to be cool with leadership. If you went as an outsider, stay an outsider, or else you're going to look ridiculous and you're going to get watered down over your career. And that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
Well, and Kyle, it kind of comes back around to the Biden conversation, because essentially what you're laying out is the fact that Democrats always want to make the case, look, their terrible relief bill that they put forward yesterday is technically better than what the Republicans have offered, which is essentially nothing. And they always want you to have to go along with them by being slightly better than the Republicans. Sure, we're bailing out lobbyists. Sure, we're bailing out debt collectors. Sure, it's wholly inadequate, but at least it's something. At least it's a little bit better than the Republicans. And that's exactly the case. And look, that's a real case, right? That's like a utilitarian argument. And that's exactly the case that is made for voting for Biden. Sure, he doesn't meet any of your standards or principles, but he's better than Trump. And so as long as he's just like a smidge better than Trump, you got to go along with him. The problem is that's essentially the path to hell. I mean, that's the path to nothing ever really fundamentally changes. They totally take you for granted. They kick you in the teeth every time, and you end up where we are right now.
If you come to me and you say, Kyle, break either your pinky finger or your nose, pick. I'm going to say neither, and how about you piss off? That's what I'm going to say. So that's effectively what I feel like is going on right now. And the people who insist that I can't respond and say neither, wrong. Not voting is absolutely an option, and it's an option that many people have taken previously. And honestly, it's why about 50% of America sits out of these presidential elections. But even to the lesser evilism argument, I mean, on which issues? Like, I will grant you, in my opinion, that I think Biden on more issues is a lesser evil. So in other words, I have more agreement with Biden on more issues than I have agreement with Trump. But that doesn't mean that they're both not beyond the pale, because I think they're both very clearly beyond the pale, and there's not enough agreement for either one for me to waste my time and cast a vote. I mean, when you look at Trump, I agree with him on TPP, and I disagree with Biden on TPP. I agree with Trump on the First Step Act. I disagree with Biden on the First Step Act. I agree with Trump in pardoning Alice Johnson. I agree with Trump that he's working with North Korea to some sort of peace deal, whereas Biden said in the debates he wasn't going to do that and that we shouldn't even talk to North Korea. So, listen, yes, I agree more with Biden on the courts, for example. I agree more with Biden on the Paris Climate Agreement. I agree more with Biden on social issues like abortion and on the issue of the Iran deal. Yes, there are many areas where I agree more with Biden. But both of them are terrible, and I'm done wasting my time playing this dumb game, and you can't shame me to fall in line because I simply don't agree with them. And that's the final point here is that, listen, Biden is, and the Democratic Party today is, they are neoliberal corporatists. I'm a leftist. I'm a social democrat. I don't agree with them, and they need to get that through their heads. And until they come to where I am, then they can piss off because I'm not going to waste my time with them.
Yeah, and that's not on you. That's on them to try to appeal to you. Nobody owes them their vote. Thank you. Kyle did a longer video on his channel. Everybody should check out. Great to see you, Kyle. Thanks so much.
Kyle. Appreciate it, man.
Good to see you guys, too. Take care.
Coming up, Biden and Sanders have officially announced, as we were just discussing, the members of those unity task forces. We're going to tell you who is a part of each when Rising continues.